We know we start with the request. We have a routing layer, eventually something calls the controller, and the controller returns a response. Let's trace through the process in Symfony to see how it all works. It's going to be awesome, I promise. Since we're using the built-in web server, this is actually executing the app_dev.php file in the web directory. So let's go there to start. And really, app.php is basically identical, so it doesn't matter which one we start going through. Ignore all the stuff at the top of app_dev.php. I want to get to the good stuff. The first important thing is that we instantiate the app kernel, which is the same app kernel you have in your app directory where you register your bundles. We'll talk more about this class in another part of this series. We'll also talk about this load class cache function, but for now, comment it out. It can get in the way if you're debugging core classes. And also, just know that the app kernel is the heart of your app. The first real important thing I want to look at is the request : create from globals. We all know that we start with the request. And hey, here's where the request is born. Request is just a simple object that holds data. And this creates a new one that's populated from the superglobal variables. Those things like $$_get, $$_post, $$_server. In fact, if we look inside, it's creating an instance of itself populated from those exact variables. Now that we're starting with the request object, the next line is the most important line inside of Symfony, the kernel arrow handle method. What's really cool about this is that you see that the handle method has input request, output response. And that is actually amazing. It means that everything that our application is, the routing, the controller, the services, all of that stuff happens inside of this handle function. It also means that our entire application, all of those layers, have been boiled down to a single function. And how pretty is it? Input request, output response. Because after all, that's our job. Read the incoming request, create a response. What I want to do with you guys is look inside that handle function and see what's going on. But first, I kind of want to prove a point about how our application has just been reduced down to a single function. One of the things about well-written functions is that you can call them over and over again. So in theory, if we wanted to here, we could actually create a second request by hand. I'll use a create function. What I want to do is process two requests at once. As you'll see later, internally in Symfony, there actually is a real use case for this. But for now, I'm just playing around. So we'll have this request look like it wants to go to /dinosaurs/22, which is one of those pages we actually have right now. Then we'll say response2 equals kernel arrow handle request2. We're processing two separate requests and getting two separate responses. I'm going to comment out the send and terminate calls temporarily, and to prove that things are working, I'm going to echo the content from the original response, then echo the content from the second response. So hey, let's see if we can print out two pages at once. When we go back and refresh, this is really cool. On top, we see the page that we're actually going to, and below, we see the whole other page that was processed beneath it. Our application is just a function, input request, output response, and that's a really powerful thing to realize. Let me undo all of this and get back to where we started. Let's look inside of that kernel handle method. The kernel class is our app kernel. If I hold command and click into the handle function, it's going to take us not into app kernel, but its parent class, kernel. This class is something we're going to talk about in a different part of this series. Ignore for now, because it offloads the work to something called HTTP kernel handle. I'll use a shortcut in my editor to open HTTP kernel. In PHP Storm, you can go to Navigate, then Class or File. So I'll use the Command O shortcut to open up that class. We're looking for that handle function. Because effectively, when we call handle in app_dev.php, it's being passed to this handle function. You can see the request argument. Awesome! Now what is handle actually doing? So far, not much. The important thing to take away here is that there's a try-catch block. This means that if you throw an exception from anywhere inside your application, like a controller or a service, it's going to get caught by this block. And when that happens, you'll get passed to that handle exception function, which is what tries to figure out what response to send back to the user when there's an error. That's something we'll talk about later. The real guts of this are in a function called handle_raw, and this lives just a little bit further down inside this same class. We're going to walk through every line of this function. You can see that it's not that long, and what's really amazing is that handle_raw is the Symfony framework. This is the dark core guts of it, but it's also the dark core guts of Drupal 8, and the dark core guts of Silex, or PHPB. All these very different pieces of software all use this same function. How is that possible? How could this one function be responsible for a Symfony application and a Drupal 8 application and a PHPBB application? We're about to find out.